is Baseball Tonight, the podcast.
Thanks for listening. I'm Buster Olney, and this is the Baseball Tonight podcast for Friday, July 11th. On this date in baseball history, in 1985, Nolan Ryan of the Houston Astros racked up career strikeout number 4,000. This was the radio call of that milestone strikeout.
A straight up field. Danny Heat for Mike Scott. Danny Heat played with Nolan Ryan. He was a teammate of Nolan Ryan. And he is going to try not to strike out here. But it's bang. He's out. Ryan got it. Well, they're shooting off the scoreboard. Something ordinarily safe for a home run, but why not? Nolan Ryan, the all-time Major League strikeout leader, has now got 4,000 strikeouts. And he tips his hat to the crowd. They're going wild.
And think about this. After that, after strikeout number 4,000, he added 1,714 more to finish with a career total 5,714. Pretty amazing. Clayton Kershaw's incredible streak has ended, but the talk around baseball is about some devastating injuries. Let's get to the headlines.
The first pitch.
Clayton Kershaw carried a streak of 36 consecutive scoreless innings into his start against the San Diego Padres on Thursday, but Chase Headley, the Padres' third baseman, hit a solo home run on a 1-2 count. Kershaw, at that moment, you could see this hint of frustration in his face when the home run was allowed. The crowd at Dodger Stadium stood and cheered for Kershaw for the end of this consecutive scoreless inning streak at 41. But Kershaw didn't even acknowledge the crowd because he was focused on trying to win the game, and he wound up pitching an absolute gem. The Dodgers win 2-1 after the game. Kershaw talked with Atlanta Rizzo of Sportsnet.
11 punch-outs for you tonight. Another tremendous performance and a 2-1 win. What in your arsenal, Clayton, was working so well this evening?
I was just trying to throw strikes tonight. I don't know. The guy they had was pitching really well, so just trying to stay in it.
You definitely threw strikes. You threw 11 punch-outs. Let's talk about the scoreless streak. I know you don't necessarily want to, but everyone's talking about it. MVP, they're chanting for you already. No-hitter already this season. 41 consecutive scoreless innings. I know the only thing that matters to you is the win, but can you appreciate what you were able to do looking back now?
Yeah, it's cool. I think, I've said it before, but you never try to give up runs. So as long as you're not giving up runs, you're doing your job. And Headley put a good swing on the ball, and that's what happened. He's a good hitter.
What is it that you gave him? What happened? What did he hit?
It was a slider. Yeah.
2-1 win. You know that these guys always play you tough. 4 games left before the break. Don Mattingly always talking about playing to the break. Can you just speak to the importance of getting game 1 of a 4-game set?
Yeah, this is right where we want to be. We're in first place, and we just try to stay there.
Don Mattingly, the Dodgers manager, talked about Kershaw's reaction to Chase Headley's home run.
He's been so good, and you kind of see he gives up that run there and just unfazed, just kind of marched right through that and kind of continued on. So, obviously special once again for us.
We got some more news about the All-Star events coming up. The final vote was won by Chris Sale of the Chicago White Sox, Anthony Rizzo of the Chicago Cubs. They're both going to be added to the teams of the respective leagues. Rockies first baseman Justin Morneau, who did not win the final vote, will participate in the Home Run Derby, as will Josh Donaldson of the Oakland Athletics. And Angels shortstop Eric Ibar has been added to the All-Star team to replace Royals outfielder Alex Gordon, who's dealing with a wrist injury. And there's no doubt the big news on Thursday was about injuries. For example, Masahiro Tanaka has a partially torn ligament in his elbow, and he will be out at least 6 weeks. This is what Brian Cashman told reporters that Tanaka was diagnosed. He saw 3 doctors on Thursday. He has a partially torn ulnar collateral ligament, and so they're going to go through this treatment program over the next 6 weeks, and it's still possible that he's going to need Tommy John surgery. Joe Girardi, the Yankees manager, talked about this injury.
He's going to go, he saw 3 different doctors. They recommended treatment, a little bit of rest, and then, he'll be out at least 6 weeks. But, guys have had success doing this, and keep our fingers crossed.
How optimistic are you right now that you're going to get him back in about 6 weeks?
Well, I don't know if it'll exactly be 6 weeks, but it'll be at least 6 weeks. So, you got to see how the treatment goes, and once he starts to throw the program, what he feels, and then you go from there.
Obviously, worst case scenario would be surgery, but how do you kind of take in this news? How do you kind of rate this news?
I mean, he's not the first guy to have this, and guys have been able to rehab it and get back and pitch successfully. So, it is what it is. We're not going to have him for at least 6 weeks, and that's the tough part. But I'm optimistic that we'll have him back.
Notice how Joe repeatedly said at least 6 weeks. It's very possible that Tanaka is done for the rest of this season, and it's possible at some point that, just like Matt Harvey last year, he'll wind up having Tommy John surgery, and we'll be talking about this injury affecting the Yankees well into the 2015 season. Stefania Bell, ESPN injury analyst, who was on SportsCenter with Doug Kazarian, talking about the rehab process going forward for Tanaka.
How does rehab heal this injury as opposed to surgery?
The main issue is it's not invasive. And you're hoping that if you can get a pitcher through this next 6 weeks, now he's having a PRP injection. There are platelets in there and healing factors that they're hoping are going to help the soft tissue to repair itself from this new acute tear that he has. And then the big hurdle is getting through any discomfort and being able to pitch effectively. Obviously, there are no guarantees with rehab, but you try it first because 6 weeks is a much better option than 12 to 18 months, and we know that that's the timetable if he has to head to surgery. You also look at where the Yankees are in the calendar. Being in the middle to the late part of the season, it makes sense to take 6 weeks now or 2 months and give this a try, because if it's successful, he'll have avoided a major surgery. But he wouldn't be coming back potentially even at all next year if he were to have the Tommy John procedure now. So waiting 6 weeks and giving this a chance to work, it's a no-brainer.
Yeah, the Tommy John surgery is not something, obviously, Yankee fans want to hear. So let's say best case scenario happens, 6 weeks of rehab, he's back on the mound. How will his throwing motion and how will his pitching change based on this injury?
Really, you hope it doesn't change too much. The things you typically see when a pitcher is starting to struggle because of this injury is a drop in velocity, which Tanaka really didn't have. You might see problems with command. That's what you were starting to see with him. You might hear the pitcher complain of soreness or discomfort, which can be mild. It's not always severe pain. And Tanaka was complaining of soreness last night. So the goal would be to get him back pain-free, be able to maintain his velocity, be able to locate his pitches, and functionally, that's how they're going to determine that he's really back to himself.
We'll be talking about the Tanaka injury with Karl Ravech and Justin Havens later on in the podcast. And if you want to hear a possibility for who the Yankees might be looking at in trade, I would encourage you to go back and listen to Thursday's podcast. Keith Law and I talked extensively about what's in the market for the Yankees as they look to replace Masahiro Tanaka going forward. Red second baseman Brandon Phillips is expected to miss 6 weeks. He'll have surgery for a torn thumb ligament. Meanwhile, Reds pitcher Homer Bailey left his start on Thursday because of knee pain. The Reds are saying that they don't think that he's going to miss his start. But the biggest injury in baseball on Thursday was the St. Louis Cardinals finding out that they're going to be out without Yadier Molina, their all-star catcher, for 8 to 12 weeks. Molina talked about this with reporters.
I almost cried. You know, I mean, like, for me, being this long, it's frustrating. You want to be here, to be there with the team playing. Just a bad feeling.
Eduardo Perez, a former Cardinal and our colleague here at ESPN, talked with Adnan Virk on Baseball Tonight about what he thinks the Cardinals need to do next.
The MVP right now is going to be John Mozeliak. He's going to have to wheel and deal and make deals. If he wants to win this year, he can, because he has the pieces in the minor leagues to do so. So now the pressure's on him. In a city like St. Louis, which understands baseball, now he is the main guy in making a decision.
Derrick Goold covers the St. Louis Cardinals for the St. Louis Post-Dispatch. And Derrick, we were talking last night on Baseball Tonight, and I thought Jason Stark described it the best, that the Cardinals losing Yadier Molina is like the Denver Broncos losing Peyton Manning. You know, there are not a lot of great comps for a quarterback with baseball, but in this case, I think that's a perfect way to describe that. What do you see as the impact of this injury to Molina?
Yeah, that's actually a great example, because we've kind of compared him to John Elway in the past, just a guy who has won championships and stuff, so that's interesting. I mean, he's one of the most irreplaceable players in the game, and he's also, in a lot of ways, I'm sure people can see it on the field, and it's tenfold off the field how he's the heart and soul of the team. You know, they rifled through so many young pitchers last year, got the season that they did out of Michael Wacha, and on, partially because the pitchers say Yadier Molina is their security blanket. They go out there, they're a new kid. Marco Gonzalez, for example, launches from Double-A to the majors, and the older veterans are like, he's going to do well because he's got Yadi behind the plate. They don't talk about his stuff. They don't talk about his poise. They say Yadi's going to decode what he has to offer that day, and he's going to shepherd him through. Molina is just, he has that reputation. He has that calming that creativity behind the plate, and now the Cardinals are going to have to replace all that and one of the bats that they count on because of the player he's become. It's, you know, he and Adam Wainwright, we talk about this a lot. There's just not a replacement for them around.
So what was the reaction in the clubhouse after this news came down?
It was pretty quiet. You know, Mike Matheny brought up the fact that they played very flat last night, had a very uncharacteristic game last night, and you know, his concern was, he said that, you know, he goes, I hope not that it was related to Molina, but he recognized that there was a lot of focus yesterday on who they didn't have and the big player that they were going to be without for a while. Molina said that when he was told yesterday morning, he kind of had a suspicion, obviously, because it was his thumb, that it was pretty serious, but when they told him that he would require surgery, and then the big hit was telling him how long he would miss, the 8 to 12 weeks, he said he almost cried, and he was pretty emotional talking to us. You know, he just said that he felt like he was, you know, he's still part of the team, but he was, you know, instantly removed from the team because of the injury, and that was frustrating for him. And I think his teammates, who obviously are very fond of him, kind of felt that on the fringe as well. They empathized with him.
I know that the Cardinals, at least internally, have had conversations about John Buck, the veteran catcher who was just DFA'd by the Seattle Mariners. In talking with people around baseball last night, they wondered about Jose Molina, his brother, who is certainly going to be a player who could be made available by the Tampa Bay Rays. As you know, he's known to be great with pitchers like his brother, not nearly as much of an offensive player. What's your sense of what's next for the Cardinals at catching while Molina's out?
Right. Buck is one. George Kataris is another. Molina, they're going to try to get a sense here. You know, Mozeliak was pretty candid, saying that he doesn't have to do anything this weekend. They can look the waivers. They can see if there's a warm body there to be a backup. But he said if it's a trade, you know, they have some time here over the break to ascertain who's available and who has the right price. You'll recall last year they were in Pittsburgh at the trade deadline, and Yadier Molina had an injury that they were having checked out hours before the trade deadline, and they were kind of scrambling to get a replacement in case they needed one before the deadline passed. And Mozeliak found a lot of teams were, as they should, trying to take advantage of him and his urgency. He thinks he can play this a little bit out so that he's not in the same bind, not having to pay the same price, where a catcher can actually find a good fit. And they also, in the immediate future, and maybe for a while if he does well, are intrigued to see what Tony Cruz does. Here's a guy who's been a backup for Molina for several years, has sort of mentored under Molina, a guy who transformed himself from a third baseman and a pretty good hitting prospect, a real good hitting prospect, into a catcher, and has really thrown himself into let's say, being, the Molina style of catching. He's as close to a Molina brother as you're going to get because of how close those two are as friends, and they think there's some life in his bat that could be intriguing with everyday play. So they're going to want to see that for a while, but they understand, or they recognize the importance of adding another catcher, even if that catcher's an experienced guy who can back up Cruz.
So I'll be the glass half full guy here and try to pick out this silver lining for anyone who's in Cardinals Nation, because one of the cool jobs about covering all of Major League Baseball is you hear from people with every team exactly all the different things that are going wrong with their specific teams, and we know that the Cincinnati Reds are dealing with a ton of injuries. They lose Brandon Phillips for many weeks. Joey Votto may not play again this year. Homer Bailey came out yesterday to start with a knee injury, and although they're saying he's not going to miss a start, it's certainly something worth watching going forward. Garrett Cole, who's so important to the Pittsburgh Pirates, he's dealing with a lat issue, and while they're trying to dress it up, I mean, the bottom line is the Pirates have no idea if Garrett Cole can be effective for them the rest of the year. The Brewers, meanwhile, have just forgotten how to win games. So as someone who's covered the National League Central for a long time, what do you make of the landscape of this division?
Well, I'm struck by the fact, one, that as you listed the injuries, not one of them was on the Brewers. And while they're playing bad, it seems to be every team has that stretch in them this year. And they've lost, 9 out of 10, swept by the Phillies, and they're still 2 games up in the division. And they don't have, they have some injury concerns, but they don't have the big missing piece right now. They could later. But that the other teams have. I'm also, I am reminded of this, and this is because I'm in the dugout before the game talking with Mike Matheny. He is fond here recently of reminding us that they are 2 games out and playing pretty good baseball, despite what you might read in the coverage, which is kind of a good point. They haven't played well. They haven't put together a complete game, really, or they did it in the Toronto series, but not often. The offense certainly hasn't played to its potential when you look at some of the slugging percentages and the struggles that Alan Craig has had. And then you have guys right now in the rotation who are 5-inning pitchers, and that's going to put a strain on the bullpen. It already has. So I think you look at the way the Cardinals have kind of gone about it, and to look up and say they're only 2 games out, and they could have been with a win last night, 1 game out, and they hold their fate in their hands with this 3-game series against Milwaukee this weekend where they could end the first half in first place. That's remarkable. I'll tell you, Buster, what I see in the NL Central is volatility. And the Brewers have played the best, and every other team has given them a chance to run away and hide with this thing. But the most recent stretch has brought them back to them, and, it just could be, it's going to be a really wild race. I'm not sure that 3 teams could come out of this division because of how much they're going to beat each other up in the second half and how much they play each other. It should be wild. I think you have to worry about the injuries most with the Cardinals and with the Reds and how much that costs them here. Not in the immediacy, Buster, but in the next couple, say, 3 weeks.
Hey, Derrick, I will see you at the All-Star game, and thanks for taking the time to do this.
No problem. I hope it worked out, Buster.
It's the Fireball Express with Karl, Ravech, and Justin Havens on Baseball Tonight.
Justin Havens is the king of research for Baseball Tonight. He's the producer of the Seamhead edition of Baseball Tonight, which was on again on Thursday evening. Karl Ravech is the host of Baseball Tonight. Now, he is not here this week, Justin. Do you have some sense of where he might be?
Listen, we spent some time on the podcast, I don't know exactly how long ago, but a month ago, talking about, maybe one night where I was slow to get going the next morning and Karl needed to sort of be there to get me going and to motivate me. And unfortunately, I'm not in Farmington right now or Avon to get Karl going. And, we're going to have to carry on with just the 2 of us. I have no idea where he is, because obviously you and Tim carried the show last night while we gave him the night off. And, it's disappointing, but I think you and I are more than capable of, throwing it back to 2013 and doing this as a 2-man thing.
Yeah, if we had a scoreboard in the green room at ESPN, The line of didn't answer the bell now moves to 1 for Karl, correct?
Yeah, I think that's fair to say.
Okay, let's move ahead. Just kidding. Karl has a week off this week, and we're just giving him a hard time. Clayton Kershaw last night saw his consecutive scoreless inning streak ended 41. And Justin, I was speaking with an executive, I think it was Wednesday or maybe it was yesterday, who basically said to me, look, if this streak ends, he's going to have another one. And he may, if he doesn't break Orel's record, Hershiser's record, this time he's going to break it another time. And there are going to be more no-hitters because right now he's that good. And there were so many great numbers that have come out of this streak. For example, I love the number going into the start last night that opposing hitters with runners in scoring position had actually gotten the ball to the infield twice in 17 attempts, which tells you exactly how dominant he is. Tell me what you thought of this scoreless inning streak and what you think of Kershaw these days.
Well, I think I might have made a comment on this podcast at some point that for as great as Clayton Kershaw was, he wasn't among my 5 or 6 favorite pitchers to actually watch. And I might have to revise or forget I ever said that comment because this was special. I mean, it's one of those, performances that I'll remember for, probably the rest of my life. It was as impressive as I've ever seen a pitcher. And I think when we started this season with some of the injury issues that surrounded Kershaw fresh off signing that contract, I for one was, thinking in the back of my head, all right, here we go again. And he has somehow managed to come back from that better than he was in his historically great campaign last season. And, I think he continues to separate himself from the rest of pitchers in baseball by, whether it's the slightest margin or not. I mean, he gave up 8 hard hit balls over the stretch since June 18th. 8 hard hit balls and over 530 pitches. That's,
oh my God.
This wasn't even all. I mean, you have to have some good luck to reel off a streak like this. But this wasn't like, this wasn't a balls in play miracle. This was people just aren't making hard contact against him. And he's striking the rest of them out.
We have breaking news. I've been told that Karl Ravech has joined the podcast. The other half of the Fireball Express is here. Karl, welcome to the show.
I'm not quite sure what happened there. That was a fireball derailing because I must have some type of Kershaw-infected phone where I just couldn't make contact. I didn't quite get it. There was nothing that would be interrupting my service to the Fireball Express. So I apologize, although I really wish I knew what I was apologizing for. We may need to get on the horn with one of these carriers and find out what the heck is going on.
Justin, I need your reaction to that before we move ahead.
Well, as someone who's had connection issues, I'll let him off the hook here. I was worried that the partner in crime had fallen to the wayside, fallen down. Hopefully, I was hoping he could get back up, and he's here, and I think we'll have a better podcast for it.
Oh, no question about that. Karl, we were just talking about Clayton Kershaw and how unbelievable his streak was. What do you think?
Well, I actually got a chance to watch last night, and, we've all gotten to know him fairly well, and I remember being there in spring training and asked him why he held his hands way above his head, and he looked at me and said, I really don't know. It's just sort of something I've done, and it gets him into a comfort zone. And, there are a few people who are probably more comfortable in their own sort of uniform or skin than he is, and another guy that's very much like that is Adam Wainwright. What I do find interesting is when you watch the entire game last night, and I know that Justin just said 8 hard hit balls, the one ball that went over the fence, and this speaks to pitching in general, but when you have the great pitcher like Kershaw is, hitters hit mistakes. They don't hit pitchers' pitches, and for his entire career, for the most part, he's been making pitchers' pitches, which means nobody can really hit it. It's kind of like what we've just experienced with the World Cup. When a penalty kick is struck by a good goal scorer and it's put in the right place, a goalie can't save it. Every save that a goalie makes in a penalty kick is because the kick was a mistake. It wasn't a perfect kick. Even if you as a goalie gets right, you're not going to be able to get to that kick. So as a pitcher, when Kershaw is pitching pitchers' pitches, you can't hit them. And he's got more control over his command now, and 3 pitches that work. I assume he's going to start another streak. Barring injury, there's no reason to think that this type of, almost futility from hitters will continue. It is really cool to watch. You do make a mistake and it's going to get hit, but he just doesn't make any mistakes.
Before that Chase Headley home run, opposing hitters during the course of this streak with 2-strike situations, which is what Headley was in last night, 4 for 47 with 27 strikeouts. And Headley hits the home run last night. I thought, one of the cool things watching that scene last night is that when the streak ended, the fans at Dodger Stadium were great. They stood, they gave him a big cheer, and Clayton Kershaw acknowledged none of it. And believe me, Clayton Kershaw is a great guy. He's great with fans. But I love the fact that he basically he didn't get all bent out of shape because the consecutive scoreless inning streak had ended. He just continued to focus on trying to win that game. And that to me, were 2 cool moments. The reaction from the crowd and the reaction from Kershaw, which is to say, look, I'm going to try to do what I can to win the game. Guys, the big news from Thursday was about injuries. And Justin, I'll ask you to give me the statistical value of these players to their respective teams who were lost. First off, Yadier Molina of the St. Louis Cardinals.
Well, there's no understating Yadier Molina. I think we'll all acknowledge that most of the stats, for as advanced as they are, probably don't do Molina justice either. But he's been among the most valuable catchers in baseball as measured by wins above replacement. And my single favorite stat, and sometimes I think it's a case of you don't need to overthink things, is that since Yadier Molina's first full season in 2005, the Cardinals have allowed 240 fewer stolen bases than any other team. The Cardinals have allowed 480. The Reds have allowed 720. I think that pretty much says it all. And when you add the fact that he's an impact bat at the position as well, we're talking about 5+ wins above replacement, per season over the last 4 years. This is as valuable as a catcher gets in the modern game, and I'm not sure that there's any solution. This could cost 3, 4, 5 wins down the stretch. Really, no matter what, whether it's John Buck or a Giovanni Soto or someone like that.
Yeah, he directs the defense. When you talk to the Cardinals infielders and outfielders, they'll tell you that he gives them a lot of cues on where to position based on what the pitcher's doing. When you talk to the pitchers, they talk about his incredible imagination and pitch calling. And, of course, what he does with a running game has been well established. He completely shuts it down, and he really has become a very good hitter. And I thought Jason Stark on the Nerd version of Baseball Tonight last night drew a great comparison. And you don't really have these type of comparisons between football and baseball because they're imperfect, but I think in this case it is. He mentioned this is like the Denver Broncos losing Peyton Manning. This would be like the New England Patriots, Karl, losing Tom Brady. That's how big of an injury this is.
Well, I think I'm kind of amazed by the universal praise, and it comes from not only players that play with him, pitchers that pitch to him, but it comes from people who play against him. And, when we think of most teams, and if we look back over the last 10, 12 years, teams that have won World Series, generally it's attributable to the team. In this case, the success of the Cardinals is kind of odd. Most people say hinges on the presence of Molina. His ability to control the game, but the things, and I think it was the World Series maybe last year, when he went out to a mound to kind of slow down a pitcher, and it was brought up by Schilling at that point and others. This was not at the behest of the pitching coach or Matheny. He just went out there and did it, and he has a unique feel for the game, I think. He has a unique feel for pitchers, and that type of command over an entire game, be it a personality or an ability to command a baseball, he went out there slowly, kind of came back in. Obviously, it didn't do much given the outcome, but his ability to recognize situations is what I think is going to most be missed. You know, he came up with big hits last year. Yes, he can throw runners out, but when you lose that type of, and your point about Brady, you know, is seemingly well taken. Although Brady got hurt, and they brought in a guy that ended up making a lot of money in Kansas City, and they won a lot of games. It's going to be interesting to see how the impact affects the wins and losses, because everything that you observe, and then more important that you hear, is that this is going to be a devastating period of time. And if it lasts the entire season, you know, as bad a news as it is for the Cardinals, this is a huge break for the Pirates and the Brewers. It's going to be interesting. This may be one of those situations you can tangibly say, wow, they lose him, and look at what happened to the record, because he affects every single play of every game by being the catcher.
Justin, Brandon Phillips of the Cincinnati Reds goes out with a thumb injury. What's his value to Cincinnati?
Of the injuries we're going to talk about, with all due respect to Phillips, I think he's not nearly as significant of an injury. You know, we're talking about a guy who's been worth something around one win above replacement so far this season. So if you remove him and you know, replace him with the type of player they're likely to replace him with, I don't think this costs the Reds more than a win or two over the course of the season, or the course of his absence, I should say. You know, maybe Brandon Phillips of 2011 it is a significant blow to the Reds' chances, but we're talking about a guy with a 701 OPS who, I think no matter what you consider his defense to be, is a far inferior player than he was, you know, 3-4 years ago, and it's been a steady move in that direction. I think this is I don't think this is the loss that derails the Reds. I think it's been all the other losses through this point in the season that have, you know, prevented them from getting off to a better start. And, you know, I think Joey Votto and his ineffectiveness is far more damning to the Reds' chances than anything from Brandon Phillips.
Yeah, to that point, Karl, we had a discussion last night on Baseball Tonight about the National League Central, and two things jump out at me. First, obviously, the landscape has changed dramatically because of injuries. We don't know what Garrett Cole is going to give the Pirates going forward, if anything. Let's face it. Joey Votto may be done for the year. That's what it sounds like. Brandon Phillips is going to miss a significant amount of time. With the St. Louis Cardinals, we have no idea if Michael Wacha is going to pitch again for them this year, because you're talking about a bone injury in the shoulder of a pitcher, and now Yadier Molina goes out for a long time. And so the takeaway from that is, I think that whichever team helps itself the most before the trade deadline, I think the Cardinals have the best opportunity because they have the most prospects, is probably going to that's going to make a difference, the moves between now and July 31st. And the other thing, too, is, my goodness, how wide open of an opportunity is there now for the Milwaukee Brewers?
Well, you know, and we had this discussion on Wednesday on Baseball Tonight. It's the idea that the Brewers are a team that has historically taken chances. You know, I mean, the Sabathia signing was one of those great kind of moves or deals where they kind of came out of nowhere. A Brewers move to acquire a player, be it of the caliber of a David Price or less, there is zero surprise in any of that. The combination of Mark Attanasio and Doug Melvin, to me, really has been as good, given the markets they play in, has been as good a GM and owner combination really as there is in baseball. They haven't won, but they've done a lot of really smart things and have a lot of good young players and acquire or develop good pitching. You know, if you were kind of handicapping a race given owner, GM, manager combinations, that group in Milwaukee, I would put ahead of the group in Cincinnati, the group in Pittsburgh, and even the group in St. Louis. What St. Louis does really, really well, obviously, is you know, draft and develop pitchers. But as far as acquiring players and kind of taking those big-time moves, the Brewers are, to me, in a horse race, they're a neck ahead of everybody else. And given, knock on wood for them, their relative health compared to everybody else, I would now put them as as a prohibitive favorite. We were always kind of waiting for St. Louis to do something to kind of take off, but that hasn't happened. You know, Alan Craig has not been Alan Craig. Holiday hasn't hit. Clearly their numbers with men in scoring position is entirely different. So I think that the Brewers, given all the things I just talked about, are the favorite to win that division now.
Justin, Masahiro Tanaka, define his loss.
So Tanaka's been worth 4.2 wins above replacement as measured by Baseball Reference this season. The next closest starter on the Yankees has been worth 0.9, which is Hiroki Kuroda. There's a massive gap between him and everybody else in that rotation. You know, it's been said already, but you can't imagine a more significant loss for any individual team and any individual player in the game right now. And, you know, he wasn't the same guy over the last 4 starts, but I think, you know, this is how much he means. I think even if you would have taken his performance from the last 4 starts, in which he posted a 4.25 ERA, you can probably make a case that that version of Tanaka would still have been the most valuable Yankees starter that they have going. This is the death blow to the Yankees' chances this season, as far as I'm concerned, and I think objectively, you know, you now have, between Sabathia and Tanaka, you have $45 million worth of payroll tied up in, you know, what could end up being functionally season-ending disabled list trips. 4 of the 5 opening day starters are now, or part of the starting rotation, are now on the DL. The last time that happened to the Yankees by the All-Star break was 2008, the year they missed the postseason. This is not good, obviously, and you're talking about either the first or second most valuable starter in the AL through this point in the season on a team that had essentially no room for error in the rotation.
I hear you, Justin, saying it's a death blow, and I agree with you. I think it probably does end the Yankees' chances, but they'll run the race, and they'll be out in the trade market, and they'll be looking for help because that's what they do. And, Karl, I think in the American League East, you still have to run the race because I don't think the Baltimore Orioles, who clearly are sort of beginning to appear as if they're the team to beat in the American League East, they're not a great team. And if I'm the Yankees, I'm at least looking out there and seeing what I can acquire, mostly with money, and not giving up prospects, whether it's someone like a Cliff Lee, Bartolo Colon. Yeah, I mean, that's the only caveat to it, because the Tanaka injury is an abject disaster. I mean, there's no other way to look at it, given probably his exceeding expectations in most circles. Maybe not the Yankees, because they were the ones that paid the money, but let's be honest. I mean, the idea that he was able to do what he did, to me, exceeded expectations. All that being said, I've always maintained that given the final season of Derek Jeter's career, notwithstanding that alone, but that being included, you know, Brian and Randy and the rest of the people with New York, they want to win regardless of Jeter's presence, but there's just been something obviously magical about his career, and this kind of spits in the face of all the great things that have been accomplished because people are falling like flies around him, and it doesn't seem to make logical sense. Your point is well taken, that there is absolutely nothing about this division, as good as I believe the Orioles are, that lets you think, wow, they're going to run away with it. You know, Nelson Cruz is a hamstring away from being out of that lineup, and that changes everything for them. So I would agree with you that they will go out, and they seem to have kind of ignored now the entire payroll thing and blowing out the tax that they're going to have to pay, and I have no reason to think that won't continue. But the number of injuries for any other team, really, with the exception of the Yankees, because of what they can do financially, would be over. Justin's right. I mean, the season would be over, and I'm not certain that it's not, but I do agree with you that given that division they're in, you know, why not go for it? I don't know. You guys put the Yankees in any other division. Where else would you say that they should give in, you know, and shut it down? The AL West, like, you know, that division, they've never compete with the A's. Where else would you say that? Because there doesn't seem to be that team this season that any team is out of it. Get me into the postseason and let me see what happens. But for their sake, you can't compete in the postseason without a 1 and a 2. They lost both. They don't have either. Or a 3 or a 4, for that matter,
exactly.
in the way. 4/5 of their rotation. Justin, during the Baseball Tonight that I do with you, sometimes you get me here and you'll say 90 seconds. Well, that's about what we got here for the next level evaluations. I sent out a note on Twitter asking for tweets to send in requests on players they wanted to hear about next level. D. Sobes asked about Cole Calhoun.
So this is a guy we've gotten requests on for the last couple of weeks, so I thought it was time to finally dig in here. Among the 183 batters who've seen at least 400 pitches in the upper half, he ranks 9th in baseball in slugging percentage at .622. The guys he's behind, Abreu, Tulo, Stanton, Brantley, Encarnacion, Cruz, Pujols, kind of a who's who of hitting in that zone. No batter has a higher slugging percentage in hitters counts this season than Calhoun. At 1.135, and he's second to Matt Adams in batting average in hitters counts at 415. He's chasing pitches out of the zone much less often in these situations, and it's kind of snuck up on you how outstanding his season has been, or at least I should say it snuck up on me. And he's been a real asset, and I think a real reason why the Angels have gone from disappointment last year to real threat this year.
I saw him a few weeks ago and asked him what it was like to hit in front of Mike Trout and was it a help, and he looked at me like I was the biggest idiot ever. He was like, yeah, I pretty much can anticipate a fastball. Acoustic Fish asked about Felix Hernandez.
I think there are times where a guy dominates for so long that he can sort of be taken for granted, and while he might not have the sort of streak going that Kershaw does, you can make a case that Felix is also pitching better than he ever has in his career. He's lowered his walk rate each season since 2009, 7% back in 2009 to 4.4 this year. 57% of his pitches are down in the strike zone or down below the strike zone. It was under 43% in 2012. He's becoming increasingly unhittable with 2 strikes, a 105 opponent's batting average this year. It's improved each year since 2011. He's getting more swings and misses out of the zone with 2 strikes than in previous seasons. He's using his changeup 26% of the time with 2 strikes this year, or last season he used it. He's using it over 42% of the time this year. Opponents are hitting .037 against his changeup with 2 strikes, 4 hits and 109 at bats ending that way. And his overall swing and miss rate with the changeup has gone from 31% in 2011 to 44.5 this year. He's my pick to start the All-Star game for those reasons.
Yeah, he's been amazing. Karl, thanks for doing this. And Justin, I think you'll agree with me. We hope Karl never hears the first 45 seconds of this podcast before he came on.
He's a good sport. He'll wear it well.
It's an automatic download for me, Buster. I will be downloading that as soon as it's available.
I'll see you guys later.
See you later.
See ya.
Alex Speier covers the Boston Red Sox for WEEI. And Alex, I don't think there's any question that what we've seen in the Red Sox this week is a team in transition. Look, no one's going to come out and say they've given up on 2014, especially with such a mediocre division. But it does seem like that the focus almost has become more about 2015 for the Red Sox. What do you think?
Absolutely. Look, if they're going to get back into the race, in the unlikely scenario that they would get back in 2014, it would be on the strength of guys who are going to be important contributors beyond 2014. They understand that they're not going to mortgage any part of the future. This is the time to see what the young players can do. If they're going to be really good in the short term, great. That's almost a bonus. But they have indeed changed their focus. Ben Cherington actually acknowledging in rare fashion the fact that the Red Sox are in an unusual and, in his words, unique position of looking forward, of considering selling at the deadline, and of being a team that's coming off of a World Series championship that is nevertheless in a position where it's had so many underperformances that it's been forced to change drastically its roster outlook.
What are the odds, do you think, that they will sell on Koji Uehara, the tremendous closer who threw the final pitch of 2013?
That's a good one. I think that it's creeping up towards the 50-50 mark. And, I think that the variables is anyone going to give them something worth parting with Uehara for, because as we've seen for about the last decade or so, there just isn't a lot of trade value for closers. That said, if say the A's or the Angels view Uehara as the difference maker who would define whether or not they can win a championship, then maybe you would have something other than kind of like a B-minus prospect moving, and you would start to have an interesting conversation. The Red Sox, of course, could make the argument that they could extend Uehara the qualifying offer on a one-year deal after this year, so you would have to see a trade offer that surpassed that.
I'm jealous of how you say his name, especially since my daughter, who's 14, has just started taking Japanese, and she's telling me all these cool words, and I know I'm going to be overwhelmed in the years ahead. John Lester is not under contract. He's a free agent at the end of the year. Is there any chance you see the Red Sox trading him before July 31st?
A chance, of course. You never say never in these situations, and this is kind of a time where the Red Sox have to define what they're doing broadly and boldly. And if you ask some members of the organization, is there a scenario where you can still have a really good pitching staff without John Lester? They'll say yes. It's a conditional yes. They would still have to find someone who was kind of a reliable ace caliber pitcher, so it's not an easy thing. But sure, of course they would listen on John Lester, but I still think that it's unlikely that they would get the kind of offer to motivate them to deal him unless they just conclude that there is absolutely no chance that they can retain him beyond 2014, and I doubt that they're going to get there.
If you were to draw up a list of the 10 most disastrous decisions of this year, probably the decision by Kendry Morales and Stephen Drew not to sign before the start of the year and to go into the season without a spring training would be on that list. Drew is hitting 131, and given where the Red Sox are transitioning into next year and Drew's on a one-year contract, what the heck are the Red Sox going to do with him between now and July 31st?
Such a great question, Buster. I mean, because you do have considerations that extend beyond just Stephen Drew and the future, and you also have to maintain a pretty good relationship with Drew's representative. So you need to make sure that Drew is not put in a bad situation. The Red Sox, if they continue to be in this kind of spot, are going to have to work awfully hard, I think, to make sure that Stephen Drew finds a kind of soft landing somewhere else, in which you can kind of make the case that, it was important to get him back in a situation where he was competing for a championship so that he could have the best stage in which to perform. Because, right now it's hard to imagine Stephen Drew being an important part of the Red Sox beyond this year, and they're at a place where they're kind of having to move beyond the guys whose tenure is definitively going to end after the 2014 season.
And maybe at some point the Dodgers will emerge as an option for Drew. We know that Hanley Ramirez had a lot of physical problems, and that ultimately his future is going to be at third base. And maybe the Dodgers would be a team that would say, "Look, we'll take on some of the money. We'll look for an upgrade and get a veteran who can play the infield." To me, that would be a good fit. Beyond John Lester's situation, Alex, there are two situations where I think loom for the Red Sox. One is Xander Bogaerts, who came out of last year being viewed as if the Mike Trouts and Bryce Harpers were the top young prospects of baseball, Manny Machado, Xander Bogaerts was probably just a hair behind them in how he was regarded around baseball. And what's happened to him over the last month and a half has been unbelievable in the regression of his performance. And whatever's happened, his confidence level, A, they have to restore that because he's such an important player to them. And B, it's interesting, but they're promoting a lot of young players, and almost none of them hit home runs. So to me, if you look at the Red Sox moving ahead, finding some kind of power hitter is going to be the second most important thing behind getting Bogaerts back on track. What do you make of those two issues?
Yeah, you're absolutely right, 100%. Those are the two primary issues facing the Red Sox going forward. And, of course, if Bogaerts gets back on track, then he answers at least part of the power equation, because I think that it's not a stretch to have anticipated entering this year that he had a good shot at being a 20 home run guy on the left side of the infield. And in the game right now, a 20 home run guy is becoming an increasingly scarce phenomenon, with the 30 home run guy being an almost endangered species. But it has been startling to see Bogaerts struggle for this kind of extended stretch, given how consistent and how high a quality of at-bats he was showing it on the highest stage last year. the thing that he has not wavered, the thing that he has shown is that he's not wavered at this point. He doesn't seem defeated. He still kind of believes that he's capable of turning it around, knowing that he's already had success at the big league level. But this is a reality of kind of player transitions to the big leagues, and it's a startling development. The one thing that losing to the degree that they have has permitted the Red Sox is the opportunity to give him all kinds of leash, and to say, look, it's okay if you struggle really badly. We trust that you're going to come out on the other side of this. I don't think that they're close to sending him down. If there's 3 more weeks, another month of this, then maybe that would be something to reconsider, but that's not immediate. But yes, the power question, holy smokes, the disappearance of kind of thump in the lineup has been a startling development. I think that the Red Sox are tied for the fewest number of guys with 6+ home runs on their roster in the majors. They need to lengthen out their lineup. This is why they've gone from the best offense in the major leagues last year by a lot to being the worst offense in the American League.
Pretty incredible transformation. Hey, Alex, thanks for doing this.
Thanks, Buster. Always a pleasure.
One last thing.
The 2014 Home Run Derby will be held Monday night in Minneapolis. And Josh, I got an email this morning from Bovada LV with the odds for the Home Run Derby, and I want to run these past you and see if you think that they got this right.
Okay.
They have at the bottom of the list, okay, the biggest long shot first, Justin Morneau of the Colorado Rockies, who was added to the Home Run Derby on Thursday at 15-1. And I do think it's interesting that when you talk to hitters about this ballpark, we will tell you that left-handed hitters are at a major disadvantage, and he's the only left-handed hitter among all of these guys who are going to be in this competition. So that's not a surprise that he's at 15-1.
Yeah, that's fair.
Todd Frazier's at 12-1. Brian Dozier of the Minnesota Twins is at 12-1. Adam Jones at 12-1. Josh Donaldson of the Oakland Athletics, who was added to this on Thursday, he is at 10-1. Troy Tulowitzki at 13-2. Yasiel Puig at 6-1. Jose Bautista 5-1. Yoenis Cespedes, the defending Derby champions, at 5-1. And he's not the favorite. The favorite is Giancarlo Stanton at 2-1. Those are tremendous odds. Basically, Vegas is telling us there's almost no chance that Stanton doesn't win.
Exactly.
What do you think?
I think that is probably the smart money. If I were a gambling man, which I'm not, my gambling days ended when I put a couple bucks on a horse when I was 3 years old that my grandpa gave me. And I lost, and that's the end of my gambling days. But if I were to bet on this, I'd go with our sentimental favorite, friend of the show, Todd Frazier. Some long odds. I think he's got a chance, though, and, may as well see what he can do.
I'm right there with you. And maybe it's because I want it to work out for him and, for him to have a good event. Kind of like last year, I remember I picked Pedro Alvarez because he went to Vanderbilt and because he's got big power. And I think Pedro lasted 1 round. And it feels like that's what, you hope that's not what happens with Todd. But I'm with you. If I were to, go to Vegas and pick out one of these guys based on these odds, that's what I'd go with. But on the other hand, I do think Giancarlo Stanton, let's face it, he's a secretariat of this whole group.
He is. I will say that watch out for Puig. It wouldn't stun me if Puig ends up winning it rather than Stanton.
And the key thing to watch when Puig is batting is what is the bat flip to home run ratio.
Exactly.
There's got to be at least one bat flip, when he finishes the round. But I kind of hope he does the bat flip after each home run.
Maybe we should put an over-under out there on bat flips. I'd say the over-under is 4 bat flips for Yasiel Puig throughout the event.
I'm definitely taking the under. He won't do it that much. Come on. That's it for today. My thanks to Derrick Goold, to Alex Speier, and the Fireball Express, Justin Havens, and Karl Ravech, and to Josh Macri, who produces this podcast. Have a great weekend, and thanks for listening.
Thanks for listening to the Baseball Tonight podcast. If you're playing fantasy baseball, don't forget to listen to the Fantasy Focus podcast. Check out all podcasts at ESPN.com/PodCenter. Baseball Tonight, the podcast.